Most sim drivers think they're pushing at 100%. They're not. They're just overdriving. And the worst part is, it doesn't feel wrong when you're doing it. This lap makes that obvious. Alright, so this isn't just the 993 with big arches, it's RWB. Rauh-Welt Begriff, which translates to rough world concept. It has a German name, but it's actually from a Japanese workshop. It came out of that late 90s Japanese tuner and drift culture, but applied it to air-cooled Porsches, which is kind of insane when you think about it. RWB was started by Akira Nakai after his rough world AE86 crew days. He basically started cutting into old air-cooled 911s in a tiny shop in Chiba and riveted wide fenders all by hand. There was no factory templates, no 3D scans, just eyeballing it and committing. Every RWB car sits a little different. They're slightly imperfect and slightly aggressive, which was kind of the point. But underneath it all, it's still a rear-engine 911. Most of the weight is hanging behind you, so if you get spicy on the brake release, it'll rotate whether you meant it or not. I'm running the grippy Yokohama tires with traction control turned off, but ABS is on because I enjoy finishing laps. So this is basically old school rear-engine balance wrapped in something that looks like it belongs parked at Daikoku at midnight. Let's see if pushing actually makes it faster or just messier. Right there over the crest, you feel how light it gets. If you're still on throttle when the suspension unloads, that rear wants to wander. I stayed neutral and let it settle, which isn't heroic driving, it's just restraint. And restraint usually gets you faster over a full lap. Early in the lap, everything feels sharp. The car responds immediately. Front end bites hard on entry and the rear follows pretty clean if you don't rush it. This is usually where people think they're driving at 100%, but if you're not, you're just comfortable. There's a difference between commitment and aggression, and most of the time we blur that line without even realizing it. Usually that lesson shows up the expensive way. There, the rear steps out just a bit mid-corner. Nothing crazy, but it's the kind of movement that tells you that the chassis is loaded. Quick correction keeps it tidy, but that's the energy you didn't need to spend. Clipped the curb a little harder than I wanted. Didn't look like much, but the car definitely felt it. Rear just kinda twitched for a second, and now I've gotta settle it back down instead of flowing through the corner. That's the thing with these rear-engine cars. You disturb them mid-corner and they don't just reset. You've got to earn the balance back. Now I'm starting to lean on it a bit more. I brake a touch later and carry a bit more entry speed. The car still feels glued, but the steering corrections get smaller and more frequent. That's usually the first sign you're creeping past that clean 90% zone. You don't feel slower, you just start working harder. This is usually where things start to drift off. Not because the car suddenly changes, but because I start trying to squeeze something extra out of it. You brake a little later, not because the corner demands it, but because it feels fast. You add a bit more steering, maybe a bit more throttle, and it all looks aggressive, but it's not actually cleaner. The funny part is, the laps that feel most intense usually aren't the quickest ones. The clean ones are kind of boring to watch back, especially in something like this. RWB looks wild and dramatic, but if you actually want it to flow, you almost gotta drive it calmer than it looks. Now that I've backed it off just a hair, the car actually flows better. The steering inputs are smaller and throttle is smoother. I'm not fighting the rear anymore, I'm just flowing with it. That's the difference between pushing and placing. One feels exciting and the other one wins races. Over the descent, that one rattled me a bit more. Car gets light, hands slightly become unsettled, and I accidentally grab 5th instead of 3rd. That's not a physics issue, that's me being flustered. When you're operating at the edge of your comfort, small distractions turn into mechanical mistakes. And those mistakes cost way more than a slightly earlier breakpoint ever would. Coming into the last stretch, I'm not actually driving harder than earlier in the lap. I'm driving cleaner with less correction and less ego, and a lot more placement. And the lap time reflects that, not because I sent it, but because I stopped trying to. Alright, that's enough. Car felt good, I just kept asking a bit too much from it in a few spots. It's funny, it never really felt out of control. It just got busy when I tried to squeeze that extra bit. Probably didn't need to. I always think I'm being smooth until I watch it back and realize I'm working way harder than I have to. Anyway, let's get this thing back in the pits before I convince myself to do another one. I'll catch you on the next run. Peace.